Hello, everyone. Hello.
Good afternoon, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Maybe I am having some internet issue here. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Shall we start or we'll just wait for another 5 to 10 minutes?
We can start, sir.
Okay. Now the screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So within these 4 days, we'll be discussing about the environmental geography. I believe you know about environment, few basic concepts about environment, and what do you actually mean by environment. I am being a PG student and being a master student, I'll not be able to explain a detailed concept of environment and a detailed definition of environment. Now, although in your notes it has been given, what are the different opinions of environment by different geographers or by different other scientists or from other disciplines who have defined environment. Okay, so in environmental geography is basically, we already know that the geography itself is multidisciplinary in nature, and we basically deal with the science, social science, and even the humanities. And if you'll be understanding what are the different approaches of geography, what are the approaches of studying geography, you must be knowing about the systematic approach and regional approach. So within systematic approach, you might have already know different branches of geography like physical geography, human geography, and biogeography. So environmental geography is basically a part of biogeography, where we basically deal with plant and animal communities, and it not only confined to the biogeography now, because we study a lot of things about the different components of environment, different elements, and the properties of environment, which are also related to your physical geography. So within this environmental geography, we'll be dealing with the geography of environment, human environment relationship, global environmental issues, and sustainability and sustainable development. So this is for about the environment. We basically talk about the lithosphere. These are the four spheres which are, and there are different questions. You can go through this definition. Saying something.
Your audio is not coming, sir. You are not audible.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah,
Now I'm audible.
yeah, you are audible.
Actually, I'm having some issues with my internet connectivity, maybe because of the weather conditions here.
Now you are audible.
Okay, okay. So let me continue then. Okay, so the nature and scope of environment. And whenever we are talking about the nature of environment, what does that really mean? We are basically concerned about what are the different components of the environment. Okay, so you do have a physical component, you do have biological component, and you do have the cultural component. And all these three components basically define the nature of the environment. So so here within different types of environment that we have already talked about, we do have the atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, biosphere. Okay, so what are the different characteristics of atmosphere? I think you already have studied about what we mean by atmosphere in climatology. So what are its properties? What are its functions? So it helps in sustaining the life on earth. Now because atmosphere is basically a composition of different gases and also dust particles and the water vapor. So it saves us from the hostile environment of outer space, just like you know about the ozone layer, so which basically protect us from the UV rays. And even it helps us from actually the atmosphere is actually helping us uh, in maintaining the climate. Okay, in maintaining let's say the temperature of the global temperatures. Then you do have hydrosphere. So what are the different no important characteristics of hydrosphere? So it is basically, as you know, the 72% of the earth's surface is covered by water. So out of this, ocean covers most of the part of the earth, and about 2% of the water resources are locked in the polar ice caps and glaciers. So these 2% water resources is basically freshwater resources, and only 1% is available as fresh surface water in mostly in your rivers, lakes, streams, and groundwaters. Then you do have lithosphere. So the land component. Okay, so the land component is basically the lithosphere part, and that basically consists of different minerals. Then you have soils, okay, organic matter, air, and water. Then you do have biosphere. So biosphere is basically the combination, the interaction of atmosphere, hydrosphere, and the lithosphere. Okay, I think in the previous part I was talking about these elements. Okay, so you do have physical elements. The environment can be divided into the physical element, biological element, and the cultural or the social element. So within physical environment, physical element. So what are the different different components that basically included under your physical elements of the environment? So you do have different landforms, water bodies, climate, soil, rocks, and minerals. So these are basically the physical elements, and these components all together make the physical element, and they basically determine the character of human habitat. I believe in the next section we will be discussing about the environmental determinism, and you might be knowing about what are the different factors which are affecting the population distribution of the globe. Now, if you'll be understanding about the environmental controls, so which are basically what? No, environmental controls are basically the components of the environment. Now, just like the light, water, air, then you do have edaphic factors, which basically the soil factors. So these environmental controls are basically controlling the nature of the human beings, and the work or the economic activities that is being performed by the human beings are basically controlled by the nature. Now, right now, we may say that different anthropogenic activities have changed the scenario a bit, but still there are environmental controls, so which are basically primary in nature. Okay, so now let's try to understand this physical element of the environment. So they basically determine the variable character of human habitat, its opportunities as well as the limitations. So what are the different things that a human can do and what it cannot do basically depends on this kind of elements or these kind of components. Then physical environment basically refers to the geographical climate and weather or physical conditions wherein an individual lives. So that is basically the physical element or the physical component of the environment. Then you do have a biological element. So within biological element, now let's simply uh, think about a situation or think about an no the whole globe, all all the landforms, all the topographical features and all the physiographical features that you are basically saying, just like let's say the plain areas, the mountains, the plateaus, the rivers. So all these are included under your physical element. Okay, so and then when it comes to the biological element, we are basically dealing with the living communities, and these elements are basically plants, animals, different microorganisms. So these are basically the biological elements, and they basically shape different parts of the world, and the interaction between this physical element and this biological element basically create, and we are basically dealing with the human constitute. Now whenever we are dealing with the human element, human component, and when human interacts with its physical environment, it basically creates the cultural and the social elements. Now other than, no, you don't have any kind of cultural environment or any kind of social environment. Now it's only because of humans they are interacting with the physical elements, so they are basically developing or producing that socio-cultural environment element. So what is that socio-cultural element or environment? Now let's suppose now someone is living in Bhubaneswar, and think about the the landscape. I think you might have came across the word like the cultural landscape. So cultural landscape, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by the cultural landscape? Cultural landscape is basically uh, all the attributes that has been created by the human beings, and when that is basically creating a landscape kind of landscape, that is basically known as the cultural landscape. In natural environment or in physical environment, whenever we are basically talking about the landscape is nothing but the combination of different landforms. Now let's suppose you may see rivers, plains and plateaus together, or you may see river or plains or hills. So whenever you are seeing in combination, so that is basically what we call the landscape. And in social atmosphere, you do have, let's suppose in Bhubaneswar area, you do have the market areas, you do have some administrative units. So all these kind of elements basically make the cultural landscape, and these kind of structures or these kind of functions basically basically help in building that cultural and social element of the environment. Okay, so environmental geography and its relation with other physical and social sciences. So if we'll be looking at as a student of geography, so you must be knowing that geography is the vast combination of now both science and arts. Okay, so it is very much interdisciplinary in nature, and you may be knowing different branches of geography and how they are contributing to the geography as a whole discipline. So here let's think about the physical geography. So let's think about the human geography. Okay, human geography, what are the different branches of human geography? You do have population geography, you do have social geography, you do have economic geography. So all these branches are also interconnected with the environment. Now let's suppose you are studying about anthropology. You are studying about the population geography. So they are very much interlinked with the environmental geography, or simply the environment. Now because environment is something which is connected to different disciplines. A lot of subjects, a lot of disciplines, they are studying environment based on their based on their priorities. Now let's say as a student of geography, you are basically studying environment based on your discipline or based on your subject. No, you are not studying environment just like an environmental science student. Okay, so we are basically dealing with environment. It's we can't simply deny the fact that we are not dealing with the environment. So geography itself is very much dealing with the environment, but there are different other things or other disciplines which are also very much engaged with uh, the environment. Okay, so what is the role of geographers in the environment? And this is very much subjective in nature, and I can simply speak out different roles of geographers in the environment. But it's up to you, how do you define your role in the environment? Now because being a human, we are basically living in the society. We are basically a societal uh, societal attribute or societal element, and here we are basically living within the environment, basically the physical environment. We are not basically discussing about the cultural environment here. So here, as a human being, what are your roles? Although we'll be discussing about different remedial measures to tackle different environmental problems, so in which your roles will be important. Okay. Human environment relationship. So it basically refers to the interactions and feedbacks between the human and the natural components, and how the social and geophysical systems are basically interlinked. So within this, we'll basically be dealing with the environmental determinism, the possibilism, the idea of possibilism, and the concept of uh, the neo-determinism. Okay, so what do we mean by environmental determinism? So it basically studies about the relationship between human and environment, and where the focal theme is basically about the environment. Okay, so here now what environmental determinism is saying, the concept of environmental determinism is basically speaks that it basically defines that the the behavior of the human beings or let's say all the species will be controlled by the human, sorry, will be controlled by the environment. So that is what environmental determinism is about. So here we are basically talking about the humanization of nature. Basically, nature, you might have studied about this, the humanization of nature and the naturalization of human. So the naturalization of human is basically about the concept of possibilism, where the humanization of nature is basically about the concept of this determinism. So determinism is basically telling us that the environment is active. Now while the activities of human beings or any living organisms are basically passive in nature. So here in environmental determinism, now let's take an example of different factors which are affecting the population distribution of the globe. Okay, so you do have different environmental factors, so which are basically your physical factors. So you can take into account the slope of the land, the topographical features, the availability of water, then climate, soil, then availability of minerals. Now just forget about all the anthropogenic factors or sociocultural factors. So although there are different anthropogenic factors which are contributing to these kind of factors which are basically deterministic in terms of population distribution, but the primary factors are basically the environmental factors. Now think about extreme climates. Now most of the people will not be living in extreme climatic regions. Now you can take the example of the polar regions, you can take the example of the desertic regions. So all the deserts are not inhabited by a lot of population. So in a way, we can simply say that this is environment. Now, and whenever we are talking about, let's say, the polar areas, the climates are extremes, and the desert regions, so where the climates are also extreme. So what does that really mean? It means this is basically the climate is basically uh, an environmental element or a component of the environment. So that climate is controlling the activities of the living beings or the human beings. So in a way, it is basically determining the way or the path of human beings or living beings. So this is why we are basically talking about the environmental determinism. Now you can take other examples also, how the fertility of soil is affecting the distribution of population, then how the availability of water or the availability of minerals are also contributing to the factors uh, which basically determine the population distribution of any region. So we'll be diving into the ancient history. The ancient civilizations were flourished mostly nearby the river valleys. Why they flourished nearby the river valleys? Now because the, uh, the river valleys do provided the fertile soils where different economic activities or the primary activities can be done, and the river actually supply water to those civilizations. So that is why you can take any example. Most of the examples you will be seeing, the ancient civilizations has actually flourished nearby the river valleys. Let's take the example of Indus Valley civilization, or you may take the example of the Egypt, the civilization of Egypt, and the South America, where you do have Peru, Inca. So all these civilizations were flourished nearby the rivers, and because of this, water is basically a component or element of the environment, so which is basically controlling the activities, the behavior of human beings. So this is why we are basically calling this concept as the environmental determinism. So here, environment is controlling the behaviors of human beings. Okay, so this is your environmental determinism. So who were the geographers who believed in the idea of environmental determinism? Now, mostly the German geographers, they started this idea of environmental determinism. It's not that the German geographers were the only one who supported the idea of environmental determinism. The environmental determinism actually exists way before the Germans, and the Germans basically popularized that concept of environmental determinism. So you do have Aristotle, then Strabo, who was a Roman geographer, then Frederick Ragel. Okay, so Frederick Ragel, who also believed in the idea of environmental determinism, and you do have Ellen C. Sample. So she was the only female geographer at that time. Then you do have Ellsworth Huntington. I think you might have studied about the book he has written, where he has talked about how climate influence the behavior of population. Now, different he has tried to divide the world's population based on climate and what are the different characteristics. So which will basically be seeing, let's suppose, in hot and humid climate, the characteristics of population will be something different than the polar climate, or let's say the colder climates. So the warmer climate people are different than that of the colder climates. Then you might have heard about the teleological approach. So teleological approach is basically very much superficial. I mean, now here, no, uh, here it is basically founded on the theological belief that humans are superior to all other species and the natural world, and this school uh, basically from the Christian religion tradition. Okay, so the ideology of human involvement basically deals with this. Now, human beings to exploit natural resources and subdue nature without considering the after effects of reckless and uncontrolled over exploitation. So, this concept of environmental determinism, just think about the concept of environmental determinism and the possibilism. So possibilism is basically a later concept, and this teleological approach basically gave a birth to the concept of possibilism. Okay. So possibilism was the word possibilism was first used by Lucien Febvre, and where he explained different things about the possibilistic approach. Okay, so in his article, a geographical introduction to history, he stated that there are no necessities but everywhere possibilities, and man, as the master of these possibilities, is the judge of their use. So this sentence, even in UGC NET exams, you will be seeing this line. Mostly, it asks about now who has given this line or the statement. Okay, so here what Fever tried to say to the world is basically that there are no necessities. Now there are possibilities everywhere. You do have possibilities, and man can actually uh, take that opportunity, take that possibility, take that opportunity, so that it may turn those necessities into different possibilities. And it is basically the French school of thought, the thought that popularize this concept of geographical possibilism. The dualism and the dichotomy of geography here. in- there are different dualism and dichotomy in geography. Even in different disciplines, we'll be studying about different dualism and dichotomy. So here we'll have to understand both the concept of environmental determinism and the possibilism. So both will be existing side by side, just like two sides of a coin. But different geographers did have different perspectives relating to the environment. So that is why they have given these kind of ideas or approaches to study environment. So that is basically creating this dualism, and that is basically creating this dichotomy in any discipline. In different disciplines also, you will be seeing this kind of dualism. Then Vidal de Leblanc actually was the one who also popularized the concept of this possibilism. Now, because Vidal de Leblanc was the one who mostly mostly focused on the population geography. Okay, so he introduced the concept of population into the geographical discipline. So that is why when you will be studying population as the center of any discipline, you will basically be focusing on the population only. Now, what they can do, what are the different possibilities available. So that is why the concept of possibilism will eventually emerge. So these kind of ideas actually help in popularizing the concept of the possibilism. Then you do have neo-determinism, and it is mostly known as the stop and go determinism, and the concept has been given by Griffith Taylor, an Australian geographer, and it is basically telling us about the environmental determinism and possibilism. So what do you mean by stop and go determinism? So it is it is deriving ideas from the environmental determinism and possibilism. Now let's suppose you want to build a dam. Okay, so you may build a dam, but if the nature is reacting, then you will have to stop. So here in this new idea, the neo-determinism, where it basically talked about, or the Griffith Taylor basically talked about a combination of different approaches from the environmental determinism and the possibilism. Human impact on a natural environment, and there are different impacts that is basically um, we are putting on the environment. So when we are putting pressure, now let's suppose we are putting different impact on environment, we are basically degrading or upgrading the quality of environment. Now let's suppose you are impacting the environment or any component or element of environment by providing some positive, you know, by giving some positive inputs into the environment. Now let's suppose afforestation or planting of trees. So that is basically a positive input to the environment. So in which you can upgrade the quality of environment. And while if we are making, now let's suppose we are cutting down the trees, so that is basically the deforestation. So whenever we are cutting down the trees, we are basically downgrading the quality of environment. So in a way, we do have both. The human beings do have both positive and negative impacts on the natural environment. So what are the different impacts that we are putting on the land? Okay, so land resources, as you know, the land resources are very much essential, and it's not only actually helping us to provide, the soil, the fertile soil. It also helps us in terms of, let's say, transport and communication. And so you do have different impacts just like landslides. Okay, so how landslide basically is a natural catastrophe. So they cause fatalities of people every year. Now, mostly nearby the mountainous regions, just like the Himalayan regions, and you do have all the mountain ranges of the world basically faces this landslide problem. So this is this basically no this basically damage property, this disrupt the transportation and block communication links. So you might be hearing different news from the Himalayan region. Most of the time, landslide occurs, and if you'll be visiting those regions now, then you'll you'll be aware about these kind of things. Okay, so the landslide kind of things. So water resource or water, what are the uh, different impacts that we are making on water? So human activities pollute the quality of water. So as we know, what are the different factors which are contributing to the water pollution? Just like the urbanization, industrialization, then you do have unscientific agricultural practices. So all these kind of things actually degrading the quality of water. So just like here, by discharging harmful industrial contaminants into the rivers, streams, or oceans, so that is basically degrading the quality of water. Just like oil spills. Oil spills occur, so that basically degrade the marine environment. So when marine environment gets polluted, what happens? It basically affects negatively impact or negatively affect the marine living communities. Then over exploitation of groundwater also leads to the seawater ingress in coastal aquifers. Then urban sprawl coupled with poor solid waste management result in groundwater pollution. So then when sewerage networks in metropolitan cities are dysfunctional, disease causing pathogens ravage the population. So all these kind of problems are basically anthropogenic in nature. And when you don't have proper sewerage system or proper drainage system within a city, now the urban flood concept is pretty new in contemporary time, and uh, the contemporary world is facing this problem, the urban flood. So now when the water is not discharged properly, then you do have this kind of problems. So when the bad water that basically comes in contact with this kind of flooding or flooded water, that will contaminate the water quality, and this may spread some waterborne diseases. Okay. Also, urbanization led construction of houses and occupation of watersheds and reservoirs result in inundation during monsoon and extreme weather events. And as we know, because of you may say the climate change event, or the climate change impact, there is increased extreme events. Okay, so the rainfall, the intensity of rainfall. I mean, in previous time we used to get rainfall in spells during monsoon period. Now, right now, we don't have any patterns of rainfall. So, even though the total amount of rainfall received within a region is increasing, but still we do not have a certain pattern. So, if you don't have any pattern, then the agriculture cannot be done properly. So in a way, what will happen? So it will impact the economy of any region. Now, let's suppose here in Odisha, we used to receive rainfall in maybe in mid June. Okay, the monsoonal rainfall we basically receive in mid June, and now right now we don't receive no the pre monsoon. Now this is basically the trend in India that the the pre-monsoon, the trend of rainfall in pre-monsoon is increasing, while the trend of rainfall of the monsoon season is decreasing. So why this is occurring? Maybe because of a different climate change impacts, or maybe this is pretty much complicated. The concept of climate change itself is very vast to understand. Now, although there are different proofs that climate change is occurring, so we can say that climate change is occurring, because we can't simply deny the fact that we do have different cycles. We may have a different, you you are aware about the geological time period where you might have studied about the ice age now. So you do have climatic cycles also. Now, when we are saying that the temperature of the globe is increasing, it's not that only the anthropogenic factors are contributing to the global warming or increased temperature. There are also natural factors which are contributing to this kind of phenomena, or these kind of climatic events. Okay, so no, so in a way, water is getting polluted by the human beings, and different human activities are actually downgrading the quality of water. So there are different ways you can explain this point in different ways, and so how it is impacting to the human beings is also important, because whenever you are polluting water, it is also degrading the environment. So when it is degrading the environment, it is directly impacting the human beings. Then you do have air. So air pollution is basically a common problem all over the globe. Okay. So different activities that is basically done by the human beings that pollute the water, that pollute the air, and so with the rapid development of industry, now serious air pollution is caused by discharged industrial waste gases, and in addition to that also you do have automobiles and industrial waste gas, indoor pollution. So all these are contributing to the air pollution. Okay, and there are many types of air pollutants such as gases including ammonia, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbons, particulates or particulate matter, then biological molecules. And those sources of the pollution can be divided into the burning, into these three categories: the burning of fossil fuels, where when the fossil fuels are burnt, then that basically pollute the air. Then you do have industrial emission, and as you know, different industries emit no the different pollutants to the atmosphere that basically pollute the air, and that also causes human health problems and environmental problems also. Then you do have pollution, air pollution from transportation sector, and you do have the burning of fossil fuels. Now, because you need to think about a different alternative ways in which we can actually manage to combat this transportation pollution. Okay, so air pollution from this transportation element. Then you do have biodiversity. Now also different human activities are impacting the biodiversity. Now in a way you do have now, because the biodiversity itself is environment, and different components are basically the air, water, soil. So all these are basically the components of the biodiversity. Now we are basically polluting the environment, we are basically polluting the air. Now when air pollution occurs, now now if think about um, a person whose leg got damaged in a accident, okay, in an accident. So we can simply say that he is fit. Okay, so leg is a primary component of our body. Now when one leg is damaged, what does that really mean? It is basically affecting the other behavior or other activities of that person. Now let's suppose it's not only affecting the activities or the behaviors which are only related to the legs. It is also affecting the activities or the behaviors which are relating even to the mind. Now, because he's sick. Now, in a way, this is biodiversity concept. If you'll be learning about the biodiversity, now this kind of these elements. Now, when the air pollution occurs, the air pollution actually downgrades the quality of environment, so it is impacting the environment in a negative way. And when it is impacting the environment, it is not only impacting the air component of that environment, it is also affecting other components of that environment. Now, it is not only damaging the physical environment or the physical component or the physical element, it is also affecting the sociocultural element or the biological element of that environment. Now, here also we will be having air pollution, water pollution, habitat loss. Okay, so within biodiversity, now because of industrialization, because of urbanization, and with the development of different technology, advancement in technology, now people now started exploiting the forest resources. Now, whenever you are exploiting the forest resources, now forests are basically the homes for the wild animals. Now, if we will be exploiting that, then what will happen to those wild animals? So they will be losing their habitat. So this is basically a concept of habitat loss. Then you do have hunting. Hunting now right now in contemporary times, you don't have much hunting activities, but in 19th, 18th century, in 19th century, you even in 20th century also, a lot of people they were engaged in hunting and gathering. Now, right now, we ourselves think that we are much more civilized. We cannot do that, and the government also banned these kind of activities, just like hunting. So, so for that only, we don't have much impact on the biodiversity right now in contemporary times, but uh, there are illegal hunting activities which are going on in different parts of the globe, so which are impacting the ecosystem services of that region. Now, because all the ecosystems are interlinked and interrelated, so in a way, when you are impacting the ecosystem negatively, that will basically impact all the ecosystems of the world. Okay, just give me 5 minutes, I will be back. So hello everyone, welcome back again. My screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So we'll be starting with the environmental issues here, and within this, we'll be discussing about the climate change also. Here also, we'll be discussing about the climate change. Other than that, we'll be discussing about what are the different environmental issues and what are the different factors which are contributing to the those kind of environmental issues. Just like global warming, ozone layer depletion, climate change, sea level rise, desertification. So all these environmental problems and issues we'll be discussing here in this segment. So what is the nature of uh, the environmental problems? You do have anthropogenic in nature. So the environmental problems do have natural, no, it may be anthropogenic in nature or it may be natural in nature. So anthropogenic in nature, what does that really mean? All the environmental problems which are caused due to the human beings. So these are basically the uh, anthropogenic environmental problems. So you can think about the air pollution, you can think about the water pollution, and what are the different other environmental problems which are we are basically contributing to that will be considered as anthropogenic in nature. Now, because it is related to people, it is related to human beings, so that is why these are anthropogenic in nature. Now, whenever let's say we are using excessive fertilizer in our agricultural fields. So it is basically badly impacting the uh, the agricultural field. The soil's fertility may degrade with time. So that is basically happening because we are putting so much fertilizers. So in a way, that problem is related to human beings. So that is why it is basically anthropogenic in nature. And also, uh, this these global environmental problems do adversely impact on the biogeochemical cycles of environment. Now, what are the different biogeochemical cycles? Now, have you studied about the nitrogen cycle, the water cycle or hydrological cycle, then carbon cycle? So these are primary cycles, so which are basically uh, helping the biosphere, okay, to revive and flourish. So when these kind of activities or the environmental problems occur, so this kind of activities basically fail. So that brings different environmental problems to us. Now think about the nitrogen cycle. Okay, so what are the different components of nitrogen cycle? You do have the sources of nitrogen. No, processes like uh, nitrification. Sorry, nitrification is another term. From where we are basically getting nitrogen. You do have the gas, nitrogen gas in the atmosphere. So from which we are drawing nitrogen. Now, other than that, also you do have industrial nitrogen, and you do have different. Now, from nitrogen only, we are making different types of fertilizers. So the process is basically ammonification or the production of ammonia. Okay, so the important processes which are involved in the nitrogen cycle are basically nitrification and denitrification. So nitrification is basically the fixation of nitrogen into the soil by, let's say, different. Sorry, nitrogen fixation do not only depend on the microorganisms which are basically fixing the atmospheric nitrogen into the soil. Nitrogen fixation can be done artificially by human beings also. Okay, but we'll take the example of different organisms, okay, just like ribosomes and green blue algae. So those microorganisms basically help in nitrogen fixation. And when now that basically when the nitrogen is basically fixed into the soil, now let's suppose the nitrogen is fixed into the soil, and let's suppose because of environmental degradation or because of some other environmental issues or problem, so those bacteria or let's say those microorganisms are less in number right now. So the nitrogen fixation cannot be done properly. Okay, so with that intensity, then what will happen? Then the nitrogen cycle will be affected. So this is how this kind of cycles, biogeochemical cycles, are basically adversely affected by the environmental issues. Then these are transboundary in nature. So transboundary in nature, that means this is not limited to the any kind of region. Okay, so now let's suppose we may say that the country India will be facing environmental issues. It's not only that. So it is global in nature. So the term global is very much suits here now, because the transboundary itself is basically global in nature. And even we are facing different environmental issues in India. Even all the Indian subcontinent is also facing different environmental issues. Now you can take the example of the Ganga, the pollution of water in Ganga, then the Delhi air pollution. Okay, so these are different environmental hazards which are going on, and different other countries are also facing different types of other hazards or other problems, other environmental issues. Now, the Bangladesh is facing other environmental issues. The China, the Russia, and even other European nations or American nations, uh, they are also challenged by these kind of environmental problems. So, what are the different positive factors of environmental problems? So, first of all, you do have industrialization, and industrialization is considered one of the major positive factors. After 16th century, what happened? If you'll be looking into the history of industrialization, it is basically around 16th and 17th century. Now, where mostly in and around Europe, industrialization took place. Now, right now, you do have industrialization all over the world, and it started with the concept of freedom. Okay, so we'll not be discussing about that now, because you might have studied about the Renaissance, and after which why people, why that industrialization phase came into existence. You know, uh, so what happens? So why industrialization is a problem for environmental issues, and how industrialization is basically degrading the environment. So as we know that the untreated discharge of water, or even different releasing different or discharging different pollutants to air, so that is basically degrading the air quality, and that is basically degrading the water quality, and that is degrading the environment itself. Okay, so in a way, what happens now when you are degrading the environment, different pollution through different pollutions, so there may be different impacts. Okay, increasing use of fossil fuel based energy and transport. Now right now, the whole world is dependent on transportation now, because our think about our luxuries, our services, so all these are very much dependent on other transportation facilities, and these transportations are basically run by this kind of technology. no the fossil fuel waste energy and transportation system. All the vehicles are basically running mostly now. Right now, we do have electrical vehicles, and we are basically looking into a greener alternative of the fossil fuel waste energy. But still, it is in initial phase. We can't simply conclude right now. With time, the technology may evolve, and then we can simply shift to that technology. So hopefully that future comes very soon, so that we can actually help the environment to have better air quality, and in a way also that when you will be having better air quality, it can actually revive the environment in different terms also. The climate change phenomena may have slower impacts. Okay, so definitely increasing use of fossil fuel based energy and transportation system is another cause behind the environmental degradation. So when there will be air pollution because of these automobiles, then what will happen? So there will be global warming, there will be acid rain, and ozone layer depletion also. And the serious problem is actually the growth of population. Now, in population geography, in previous part, we have already studied about the population geography, where the growth of population, uh, we might have come across words like the population doubling time, the population growth. What are the different factors which are contributing to the population growth? So, with time, there is basically a geometric increase in the population. It's not in arithmetic way, it is basically in a geometric way. So that is why the population is basically exploded in contemporary times. And with increase in population, what basically happens, the needs of the population. So you'll be having now multiplied needs. Okay, so if a family of let's say 5 members, they required somewhere around let's say two kgs of rice for their survival of one day. But right now, if there will be let's say 10 members, so definitely they will be requiring let's say 4 kgs of rice. So in a way, they will be demanding more, and it's not about the basic necessities. It's about the luxuries. Now, most of the people right now, they are demanding luxuries. Now, you can think about different our different personal spheres. Look into the let's say the perfume industry. So, which are basically we are basically releasing CFCs into the atmosphere while using the perfume. Now, think about 2 decades back. Now, how many people were using perfumes? How many people were using the deodorants? Now, right now, different multinational companies they came into existence, and they popularized these kind of products to the human society. And it's not that was it were not existing in ancient times. It was, but what was the intensity? Okay, right now, what is the intensity, and in previous times, what was the intensity? Now, and with even different other factors are contributing to that now, because the society is changing. A lot of people believe in the idea of showing off, and and we people, we are basically being a social animal. We right now we are We are believing in the concept of standard of living. So all these are making its way in which these kind of products are actually contributing to the environmental degradation, uh, and these are basically adversely impacting. Now think about the ads of fog. Okay, so fog is basically a deodorant company, a perfume company. So a lot of people started creating different sorts of videos. Now, right now, this is basically the era of social media. A lot of people are basically using social media. So you people might be using the social media. So there are different things which are, which are impacting your mindset. Now, whenever you are, let's say you have seen some arts or you have seen some videos, you are basically influenced by those kind of those kind of things. Okay, so in a way, these things are also contributing to the environmental pollution, or let's say the environmental degradation. And so, whenever there will be a population growth, the necessities or the needs of the population will be multiplied. So, when the needs of the population will be multiplied, so they will start exploiting the nature in a more furious manner as compared to the previous times. Now, because now because if they will not be getting, let's say proper food, job opportunities, and let's say other facilities, so definitely they will be diving into other things, what they can actually do to survive. Okay, to survive and flourish. So in a way they will be exploiting the nature first. So if they cannot exploit the nature, so they will start exploiting other things. Then you have urbanization. Okay, so urbanization, and how urbanization is basically a positive factor in the global environmental issues or global environmental problems. Now, because urbanization with the concept of urbanization and the people who are living in urban places, so they are basically using a lot of resources. Okay, a lot of natural resources. Now let's suppose, or how urbanization is contributing to the environmental degradation or environmental pollution, because with urban expansion or urbanization, so they are clearing forests, so there is deforestation. So in a way it is directly affecting uh, the environment. And when the deforestation is done, when you will be having deforestation, so what will happen? When there will be deforestation, the urban area will may face some kind of urban heat island effect. So you might have studied about the urban heat island. So in which what will happen, basically that urban area will be having, greater temperatures as compared to the peripheral areas. So that is basically the urban heat island effect. Why? Now, because there will be much more built up areas, so which are basically different types of buildings, and the absence of trees, the green space. So when you will not be having much green space, definitely the temperature will increase, and because, so that is why there will be the urban heat island effect will be there. And so urbanization, what will happen? Now there will be more use of, let's say, some products like AC, let's say AC, freeze, other things. So these are also, you know, contributing to the environmental problems or the environmental pollution. Okay, so basically to provide infrastructure services like housing, transport, water supply, sewerage, and energy, etc. So that lead to the depletion of natural resource base. So as a result, what happens? So there is a deterioration of air quality and water quality. Then there will be definitely a generation of waste, and the solid waste management in urban places is very is no, it is a different task altogether. Uh, no, because those kind of things are not properly managed in a lot of cities. You can take into account the India as a country. Other than few cities, the solid waste management in and the urban places of the India is not proper. So whenever there will be improper disposal of solid waste, so that create environmental degradation, that create environmental problems. Then consumption pattern and materialistic lifestyle. Because uh, materialistic lifestyle, you do understand this concept. Now, in previous times or in ancient times, the consumption patterns were pretty low as compared to the contemporary times. What happens right now? We are consuming a lot. No, we are consuming a lot in terms of, let's say, um, the the house you are staying at, and the different facilities, the interior designing or the toilets, the electricity, and other luxurious items that you are using. So that is basically what you are consuming. And let's say the clothing and the food. Okay, so all the consumption pattern is basically changing. We are basically materialistic now. Right now, we will be having let's say 2 to 3 vehicles within a family. So in ancient times, what used to happen, although they the automobile industry were not developed at that time, but at that time also people used to walk a lot and they used cycles. So those were basically eco measures. Okay, so those are basically greener measures to the environment. Those were not harming the environment at that time. Now, right now, we are using automobiles. We are using, let's say, AC. We are using other products which are basically degrading the quality of environment in different ways. So, what is global warming? Global warming is basically rising global temperature. So, that is basically global warming. So, why there is global warming? So, we'll be discussing about what are the different factors which are contributing to the global warming. There are so now mostly in recent times, what happens, it has been found that the surface air temperature over the past 100 years has been increased by about 0.5 degree to 0.7 degree. So what does that really mean? Over the past 100 years, there is only a change of 0.5 degree to 0.7 degree, and right now we are expecting a 1 degree change of temperature in near future. So that is what predicted by the IPCC, I believe, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay, so what 0.5 degrees Celsius can do right now, what we are experiencing in summer times. Now, you may remember your childhood. You may not have seen these kind of temperatures across Odisha. Now, although there are different patches which used to experience this kind of increased temperatures, just like some parts of, let's say, the western Odisha, the Balangir region, so that experienced the higher temperatures. Then some mining regions. So now, because those mining regions do have adverse impact on the temperature patterns of that region, so that is why. So with an increase of around zero point 0.7 to 1 degree Celsius, now we are having a lot of problems. Okay. So what are the different greenhouse? What do you mean by greenhouse? Actually, the concept of greenhouse came from, I believe, the European countries, or it is basically a practice of in greenhouses. Mostly, agriculture is basically done. Okay, so what greenhouses? Why greenhouses were used in colder areas, basically in temperate and polar regions? So greenhouses were used to trap the long wave terrestrial radiation. Now, because the solar radiation is basically short wave in nature, so what happens? There is a glass cover, and that the short wave solar radiation can penetrate through that glass, and it will be reaching the ground where most of the crops will be cultivated. And when the radiation will occur with the temperature drop, so then what will happen? It will basically trap that heat. Now, because the terrestrial radiation is basically long wavelength radiation, so that basically traps the long wavelength radiation, and in which it will generate the heat. So that is basically the concept of greenhouse. That greenhouse concept was actually used to understand the global warming. Now, because right now we have increased temperature conditions over the globe, so what we are basically saying, there are different pollutants which are acting as greenhouse gases. Now, because they are basically trapping the terrestrial radiation, which is basically increasing the temperature of the globe. So what are the different greenhouse gases? You do have carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous or nitrogen oxides, then CFCs. You'll be water vapor can also be considered as a greenhouse gas, and because that also traps the long wavelength terrestrial radiation. So in a way, what happens? Okay, so what are the consequences of global warming? So definitely, when there will be global warming, there will be rise of temperature. So it is basically estimated that if the present rate of increase in CO2 level continues, so it will result in rise of temperature by 2 degree to 3 degree by the end of 21st century. And what are the other consequences? You do have melting glaciers and rise in sea level. So because of rise in temperature, so those are basically melting the ice caps of polar regions. And when the glaciers are melting, it is basically it will definitely rise the sea level. So according to an estimate, if all the ice on Earth would melt, about 60 meter of water would be added to the surface of all ocean and low-lying coastal areas. So definitely it will create a lot of problems now, because 60-meter height is a lot. Now it will submerge any height which is 60 meter above the mean sea level. It will also increase the magnitude and intensity of cyclones and tornadoes. Now, why? Now, because the cyclones basically occur. The cyclones, these are basically tropical cyclones. All the tornadoes, typhoons, uh, cyclones. So all these are tropical cyclones kind of things. Okay. So these kind of cyclones basically origin in intensified low pressure zones. So when there will be intensified low pressure zones, so the chances of occurrence of these kind of cyclones will be more. So when there will be global warming, so the sea surface temperature, there will be rise in sea surface temperature. When there will be rise in sea surface temperature, so definitely the low pressures will be created, low pressure cells will be created over the sea surface in a way when that low pressure will be intensified, uh, the cyclone may occur. And if the intensity of the low pressure is very high, then uh, definitely the actually the latent heat of condensation will be more, and that will basically provide the power to the cyclone. And always remember, if the intensity of the low pressure is high, then what will happen? If there will be low pressure, there will be condensation on the top of the atmosphere, and when rainfall basically occurs, it basically releases the heat. That is basically the latent heat of condensation that powers the cyclones. Okay, and we are getting diverted into different topics. Okay, so definitely there will be if you will be having a global increase in temperature, so there will be increase in magnitude and intensity of temperature, both in magnitude and intensity. Now, because the occurrence of cyclones will be more, and the intensity of cyclones can also vary. Then impact on food production. Now, if there will be a rise in global temperature, then now that also impact the soil. That also impact the crops. Now, because few crops require a certain range of temperatures. Okay, so now let's suppose rice requires somewhere around, let's say, 25 degree to, let's say, 30 degree, 33 degree or 35 degrees Celsius of temperature. Now if temperature exceeds that, then what will happen? So they cannot adapt to that kind of conditions, so definitely the agriculture will be impacted. So in a way, the impact, there will be a negative impact on the food production. So what are the different remedial measures that we can take so that we can tackle the problems of global warming? Okay. So first, drastic reduction in emission of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. If we can actually reduce the emission of carbon dioxide and different other uh, greenhouse gases, then it can actually help in decreasing the global temperatures. Okay, now because these greenhouse gases are basically trapping the heat, so that is why the global temperatures are basically increasing. And then development of alternative efficient fuels. Alternative efficient fuels, just like we have discussed about the electricity, use of electricity. Um in transportation or automobiles. Then biogas plants should be used for domestic use. Okay, encouraging environmental sustainable practices. So limiting the driving days and encouraging public transportation in megacities. can be another option. Now cities like Singapore and Mexico are following the practice. I mean, uh, just like in USA and other European countries, they do have personal vehicles. So when all the people will be having personal vehicle and they will be traveling through their personal vehicles, then it will it will emit more carbon dioxide, okay, more pollutants to the atmosphere. So whenever we are using the public transportation system, then we are basically limiting the pollution. Okay. Then enhancing afforestation. This would basically certainly reduce the CO2 level and thereby decrease the greenhouse effect. Extensive urban forestry is another good practice. It's not only the urban forestry, I believe afforestation need to be done and reforestation also need to be done. Now, because right now, what happens, a lot of, now think about a lot of people who are cutting trees. Okay. Uh, Take the case of government stakeholders only. And if they are performing some sort of, let's say, mining activities, they will have to clear um, the forests. So that is basically deforestation. Now, although they are basically planting, let's say, 4 trees for cutting down 1 tree, but that is of no use if they are not, you know, not giving proper protection for its growth. So that is of, the plantation is of no use, I believe. No, if you can plant a tree, then you'll have to take care of that tree. Then only it will actually help, or else it is of no use. Okay, so then you do have ozone depletion. Ozone depletion is basically the process of depletion of ozone, and you do have molecular oxygen, which is basically O2, and that is what we basically inhale. And ozone is basically another atom, okay, addition of another atom, that is basically O3. Mostly 90% of the ozone is found near the stratosphere, okay. And how ozone layer basically help us? Ozone layer helps us in protecting us from, the hazardous ultraviolet rays. Now, because the ultraviolet rays can actually create problems in human. Okay, so which are the major causes responsible for ozone depletion? You do have human activities discharging harmful chemicals in the stratosphere that consume ozone and reduce its concentration. Uh, Depletion of ozone is mostly caused by following gases. You do have CFCs, methyl chloroforms, nitrogen oxides, NO or NO2, anything. Okay. Then carbon tetrachlorides. Okay. So all these kind of gases or greenhouse gas, sorry, not only greenhouse gases, these gases actually destroying the ozone. Have you studied about the mechanism uh, underlying the destruction of ozone? So it is basically the chloride. Okay, the, I believe, chloride which some sort of chemical reaction occurs. Chloride, chlorine, sorry, CFCs. Yeah. So what happens, when CFCs, now let's suppose the CFCs that reach to the stratosphere, when it comes in contact with the UV rays, The CFC is um, basically releases the chlorine. So what when chlorine comes in contact with the O3, that is basically ozone, uh, you basically get chlorine monoxide, and which is basically taking one oxygen atom from that ozone layer. Oh, sorry, the ozone gas. So in a way, what will happen? So what we will be getting with the chemical reaction of chlorine and ozone, we will be getting the chlorine monoxide and the molecular oxygen. Molecular oxygen is basically a O2. So chlorine monoxide is basically taking that one oxygen atom. So that is in that way the uh, in that way what actually happens, the ozone get destroyed. Okay, so there are I have given the example of chlorine monoxide. I have given the example of chlorine, but there are also different other gases which also do impact the ozone. Okay, then harmful effects of ozone layer depletion. So how the ozone layer depletion can actually have an impact on the human effect on human and animal health. So definitely, if there will be exposure to UV rays, it can cause cataract and skin cancer in humans. Then effect on terrestrial plants, it can also affect the health of the plants. It can also affect the aquatic ecosystems. So what are the different remedial measures that we can take? It is basically, so we can take different measures so which will limit the emission of these kind of gases, so that there will be no, the ozone layer will not be depleted. So climate is basically a summation of long-term weather phenomena of a region, and whenever we are discussing about climate, we basically uh, take into account a long period of weather phenomena. Uh, right now, just like I have given examples of increasing trend of pre-monsoonal rainfall. Okay, so what does that really mean? If we have investigated into past 3-4 decades rainfall, and it is suggesting us that now the pre-monsoon rainfall is increasing, and the post-monsoon, sorry, the monsoonal rainfall is decreasing, or it is remaining constant. So whenever we have proof that certain region is having, let's say, decreasing monsoonal rainfall and increasing trend of pre-monsoonal rainfall. So it is basically suggesting clues. So whenever we are getting those clues from different climatic elements and different climatic parameters, now because rainfall, temperature, humidity, wind, okay, air pressure. So all these are basically the elements of climate. So when these elements are changing over a period of time, basically on a long run, then we are basically considering that as the climate change. Okay, so a climate change can occur due to the anthropogenic activities. I believe all the environmental degradation factors that we have discussed. Now, because climate is uh, uh, climate is directly influenced by the environmental degradation. Now, because if there is environmental pollution, then the climate will change. Okay. Now, climate do have direct impact on sorry, environmental degradation do have direct impact on climate. Even it actually have no its impact on hydrological cycles. So when it is impacting, let's say environment is impacting the hydrological cycles, and definitely the hydrological cycles will be impacting the climate of any region. Now, because the hydrological cycle itself, the rainfall is dependent on the hydrological cycle. And if the hydrological cycle is getting affected negatively, then it will affect the rainfall pattern of that region. And definitely, if rainfall pattern is getting no, getting disturbed, then other climatic elements also disturbed. And because the humidity patterns will be different, then the air pressure patterns will be different. So in that way, it will bring the climate change. So what are the evidences of climate change? Now, because we do have right now increasing temperatures over the land and ocean surfaces, then you do have melting glacial ice and sea ice, then rising sea level and increasing humidity. So all these are different proofs that the the climate is actually changing. Okay, so increasing temperature over the land and ocean surfaces, I believe I was studying about the temperature and the rainfall patterns of a region, and I came across on different statistics that has been published by on uh, different world organizations and different important institutions about the climate change. Now, it's not only about the temperature, it's not only about uh, uh, the rainfall patterns. So, apart from rainfall and temperature, there are different other parameters which are contributing to the climate change. Now, and these are very much interlinked. Now, because the climate change itself is very dynamic in nature. Okay, so when you will be understanding about the dynamic nature of the climate change, you will understand about how other factors are also contributing to the climate change phenomena. It's not only the temperature, it's not only the rainfall. Okay, and right now the extreme events are also increasing. Okay, the extreme events, what does that really mean? The extreme events. Now, let's suppose throughout the monsoon period, now in Odisha, we basically experience monsoon in India from June to September, somewhere around in Odisha, it will be if you are living in Odisha, then it's somewhere around mid June to mid September. And the uh, the rainfall that is basically being received in the previous times, what happened, let's suppose around 700 to 800 millimeters of rainfall is basically received during the monsoon period. Then it is basically temporarily distributed throughout these months. But right now, we do have extreme events. What do you mean by extreme events? Just like, no, why now the Dubai flood came in news just a few days back, I believe. You might have already learnt about the Chennai flood. So why these kind of events are basically occurring right now in contemporary times? Because of the extreme events. Now, because there will be no rainfall for a period of time, and there will be heavy rainfall that will occur within a short span of time. So in that way, what will happen? So this is what we can actually consider as extreme event. Now, if any area which receives a rainfall somewhere around, let's say 200 millimeter, or let's say 100 millimeter within few hours, then we can consider that as extreme event. So there are different measuring units to define which is an extreme event also. Okay. Then melting of glacial and sea ice. So when there is melting of glacial ice or sea ice, then it is basically impacting the what we have already discussed, that it may submerge, let's say, 60 meter of land which is above the mean sea level. So it is basically creating problems. Rising sea level. Okay, so there will be rise in sea level because of melting of ice caps, increasing humidity and extreme events. We have discussed about this. So there are few facts which has been written here. You can go through this, okay? And again, there is another concept called desertification. Desertification. Now, while I was in graduation, I do remember one of my professors who introduced this concept of desertification, and I didn't got the concept of desertification for in the first time. No, because I thought desertification is basically about the desert. It's not only about the desert. Desertification is basically the process in which a desert is basically being developed or being evolved through time. And what do you mean by desertification? Actually, if you are cutting down tree, you are basically desertifying that region. That is also another region. Now, let's suppose you are doing some kind of activities which are impacting the ground level aquifers, which are lowering the groundwater level, then it is also desertification. Okay, so don't get confused about deserts and desertification. And I believe that is pretty easy. The What are the different positive factors why desertification occurs, and how different anthropogenic activities basically contributing to these kind of phenomena. Okay, so this is about sustainability and sustainable development. I believe this needs no introduction. This needs no counseling. I believe you know the concept of sustainability. Sustainability is basically to sustain. That is basically sustainability. And what, what we mean by sustainable development, when we are basically meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generation. That is basically what the sustainable development is all about. I believe this is the word sustainable development was introduced in the Brundtland report. Okay, so the Brundtland report in 1987, I believe. I don't remember exactly, but here, I believe the Rio summit has been given, but I don't know that the word sustainable development actually was introduced in the Brundtland report. Okay, okay, here it has been given, the Brundtland report. The Brundtland Commission actually used the term sustainable development. Okay, so what are the different pillars of sustainable development? Here you can see which is basically sustainable. You should be having uh, a proper combination of environment, social life, and economic life. So in a way, so that you can achieve the sustainability approaches to sustainable development. And these are pretty easy. You can go through this. If you have any doubt, uh,
We can discuss for 5 minutes, or we'll complete this session today.
Anybody who is online?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we'll be discussing tomorrow then. If you don't have any doubts, or
Okay,
if
sir.
you want to share something, then you can say.
No, sir.
Okay. Why there are very less number? In previous semester or in previous counseling, I believe 20 to 25 people were joining. Right now, you are only seven or eight people are joining. Okay, then we'll discuss tomorrow. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.